Velkommen til Jeg har set verden styrte i grus, en original podcast for Caritas Danmark, støttet af Danida.
Jeg har tænkt på noget. Hvor skal man starte en historie, når den ikke har en start? Og hvor eller hvornår skal man slutte den samme historie, når den ikke har en slutning? Det har jeg tænkt en hel del over, siden jeg snakkede med to helt særlige personer, der har set verden styrte i grus. So, would you start? Your name and profession and...
My name is Vicken Cheterian, and I live in Geneva, Switzerland, and I lecture international relations at the University of Geneva.
My name is Stepanian, and I work for Caritas Armenia in Yerevan office of Caritas Armenia.
En anden ting, jeg har tænkt på, da jeg skulle fortælle den her historie, er noget, jeg engang hørte, og det er, at noget af det første, der sker i en konflikt, er, at sandheden ryger. Og sandheden er det modsatte af falske rygter. Og det handler den her historie også om. Det handler faktisk om ret meget. Det er en kompliceret historie. En historie uden en egentlig begyndelse og uden en slutning. Sådan er det ofte med mange konflikter. Men i sidste ende, så handler den her historie, jeg fortæller i dag, om dem, der kommer i klemme. Helt almindelige mennesker i en helt usædvanlig, uhyggelig situation. Men altså, tilbage til spørgsmålet, hvor starter man i en historie, der ikke har en start? Well, lad os bare starte den her. Det er den 10. december 2022. En lille gruppe mænd nærmer sig et hegn og en kæmpestor port. De forlanger for adgang til minen, der ligger bag hegnet, men de afvises af vagtfolkene. Men den lille gruppe giver ikke op. De påråber sig retten til inspektion af minen, som beskyldes for at skade miljøet og ulovligt at udnytte naturens ressourcer. De følgende dage vokser gruppen af miljøaktivister, og den 14. december 2022 er minen og hovedvejen ude foran blokeret.
Связывающая непризнанную республику Нагорно-Карабакh.
Стоп! Мы говорим нет экологическому и экономическому разграблению наших национальных ресурсов.
Люди, перекрывшие трассу, представляются экологическими активистами и протестуют против эксплуатации.
Som en anden prik-til-prik-tegning har du sikkert regnet ud, hvad den her historie handler om. Historien om den lille hund, der gør den store hund. David mod Goliat, miljøaktivister mod minefolk. Hvem holder du med? Ja, det er sådan rimelig åbenlyst. Miljøaktivisterne selvfølgelig. Det vil jeg også gøre. Hvis det ikke var, fordi jeg vidste det her, der får det hele til at blive, super underligt. Fordi minen ligger i bjergene, der omkranser regionen Nagorno-Karabakh. Mere præcist ligger minen i det bjergpas, hvor hovedvejen mellem Nagorno-Karabakh og Armenien snor sig.
Armenia is a small country. Armenia is even smaller than Denmark.
Og hvis jeg lige skal have området på dit indre Google Maps, så er Armenien sådan cirka sidste stop mellem Europa og Asien.
But unlike Denmark, it's a mountainous country. And once a friend of mine said, if you take these mountains and you iron them, it will become bigger than Russia. So, and that's the greatness for Armenia. And maybe one other.
Og så er Armenien et land fyldt med bjerge. Men altså, tilbage til den her hovedvej, der som en navlestreng forbinder moderlandet Armenien med den armenske region Nagorno-Karabakh. En vej, der beskrives som The Road of Life, og som altså bugter sig gennem aserbajdsjansk territorium. Og den her snak om infrastruktur er måske slet ikke så underligt. Det underlige er, at civile skal have tilladelse af regeringen, af Aserbajdsjans regering, til at rejse ind i det her område. Det er nemlig et område, der døjer med spændinger fra utrolig mange konflikter og krige. Så hvordan har en gruppe miljøaktivister fået adgang til området, og hvorfor får de lov til at blokere The Road of Life, når det er en kendt hemmelighed, at Aserbajdsjan notorisk har været utrolig hurtigt til at smide miljøaktivister væk og i fængsel ved andre aktioner. Så som dagene går, og antallet af miljøaktivister bliver flere og flere, så er der også andre, der undres over, hvem de her miljøaktivister egentlig er, og hvorfor de ikke bliver smidt væk.
There was an investigation done by Tatian Foundation in Armenia, and they just, what they did, they compared, just did research and found out that those environmental activists, they took the photos and did investigation and found out that many of those people who were blocking the road, they were working for special services in Azerbaijan, so they were not environmental activists. And another thing is that there were some environmental demonstrations in Azerbaijan over the time for some internal Azerbaijani issues, environmental issues. And those people, they were arrested. So if they, environmental activists, if they are arrested in one case, how they can be allowed to do demonstrations and close the road. So it's very much obvious that it was not about the environment.
Azerbaijan has imposed the blockade on Karabakh by fake environmental activists who demonstrated for hours and days and months to cut the only one road linking Karabakh with outside world. Do you know in any country in the world where environmentalists demonstrate and block a road, a highway, from 12th December 2022 till mid-April? Because in mid-April, Azerbaijani military forces replaced the fake environmentalists. Now, this is very dangerous because we cannot play with environmental issues. We cannot fake environmental issues because if we fake it, then the real environment will slap us on the face. If we falsify environmental problems, then we will not be able to address the real environmental problems that all humanity and all planet Earth is suffering from.
Okay. Så vi har falske miljøaktivister, der blokerer The Road of Life, og de facto starter en udhungring af 120.000 armeniere inde i Nagorno-Karabakh-regionen. Medicin, mad, elektricitet, gas mangler. Tingene går stille og roligt fra dårligt til virkelig dårligt. Til katastrofalt.
The road was closed, so Nagorno-Karabakh Artsakh was blocked, fully blocked for any side movement. So Nagorno-Karabakh was blocked for almost 10 months, and people didn't have access to food. They were starving. Around 120,000 people, among them 30,000 children, 9,000 elderly, many people with disabilities. They were under starvation.
Normalt i de her situationer går der et stykke tid, hvor det internationale samfund trykker på, og til sidst kommer der normalt en løsning. Men armenierne i Nagorno-Karabakh hører intet. Ja, armenierne i Nagorno-Karabakh hører ikke noget i 10 måneder. Men så hører de noget. Den 19. september sidste år, altså 2023, 10 måneder efter blokaden begyndte, hører armenierne endelig noget. Noget, de ikke har lyst til at høre.
We start by heading to Azerbaijan, where there is quite a bit of unrest. The country sits between Iran and Russia, and it's home to a region called Nagorno-Karabakh, an Armenian breakaway region that sits inside of Azerbaijan. This region has been the cause of years of unrest and war, and it was in this region over the weekend that Azerbaijan launched a 24-hour assault, leading to more than 13,000 people fleeing west.
Azerbaijanske styrker trækker ind og besætter Nagorno-Karabakh-regionen.
That was a very difficult situation. I was at home in a call with a colleague from Caritas sister organization, discussing some programs, and I received a message that a new war started. It was September 19. Of course, I tried to get in contact with our partners in Artsakh, with people whom I personally know, to understand what is going on, and I couldn't connect with them. Then, when everything became obvious, we tried to mobilize all our resources to help people, and it was 24th or 25th, I don't even remember, of September, when I got a call from Nagorno-Karabakh that there is an explosion at petrol station.
Lad os lige spole lidt i historien. Vi skal nok komme tilbage til den 25. september og eksplosionen. Sagen er den, at jeg laver fra land med at postulere, at den her historie ikke har en start. Og det har den altså heller ikke. Eller starten på konflikten fortaber sig i hvert fald i tid og går mange hundrede og måske 1000 år tilbage. Men for at besvare spørgsmålet, hvorfor alt det her sker, så lad os alligevel gå lidt tilbage i tiden.
I was a child when the Soviet Union collapsed. I was going to school. I was 13-14 years old. And when the war started, the Soviet Union collapsed, there was total darkness in the country. We didn't have electricity, but we went to schools.
Tilbage i tiden til midten af 80'erne og den russiske perestrojka. Perestrojka, der betyder noget af ombygning eller omstrukturering. Perestrojka, der varede frem til murens fald og Sovjetunionens fald i 1991.
We didn't have water, but we managed to keep hygiene. We didn't have bread, no bread in the shops. People didn't have money because all factories, the economy of Soviet Union, including Armenia, it collapsed. So there was nothing in Armenia, but we survived. We went to schools, we finished schools, we went to universities without electricity, and we managed to get professions to make our country develop.
So I visited Yerevan, Armenia, few weeks after the collapse of the Soviet Union and when Armenia became independent. I'm born in Lebanon, grew up there, I lived the war there, and then I had just moved from Beirut to Zurich, Switzerland, when the Soviet Union collapsed, and I had the opportunity of going to Armenia. When I arrived there, I thought that this country is independent, but it will not survive. Armenia was in such difficult conditions. So there was the war with Azerbaijan in the east. The border with Turkey in the west was blocked and remains blocked for over 30 years. Armenia's southern neighbor is Iran, but there was no way to communicate with Iran. There was no bridge at the time to connect Armenia with Iran. And Armenia's remaining border, Georgia, to the north, led to an insecure country because in those years, Georgia was living a number of internal wars. Plus, Armenia had no energy. Oil and gas coming via Azerbaijan was blocked. The nuclear power station was shut down after Chernobyl and after the earthquake. And the earthquake that took place on the 7th of December 1988 had destroyed a number of cities in northern Armenia, including the second biggest city, Leninakan, today renamed as Gyumri, killing 25,000 people. So when I arrived there, I thought this country will not survive more than 6 months. That was my impression. But Armenia managed to survive in spite of the circumstances. It managed to survive. It managed to create, under very harsh conditions, stable economy and stable life. Now Armenia is once again facing huge difficulties because of the Azerbaijani aggression that started in 2020 and continues until the present. But I'm convinced that Armenians will find energy inside them and friends abroad, and they will survive again. So the history of this conflict goes back to the beginning of the 20th century. Before that, Armenians and Azeris lived in what was the Tsarist Empire. In every city you had both Armenian neighborhood, Azeri neighborhood, in Armenian cities, in Azerbaijani cities, sometimes even in villages they cohabited. So in history this is relatively a recent conflict, okay? So it started in 1905. But this modern conflict starts at the height of perestroika, because the Soviets created a very strange puzzle where Nagorno-Karabakh, because it was in majority inhabited by ethnic Armenians, it had autonomy because of its Armenian identity. But at the same time, the Soviets put this in Soviet Azerbaijan. So this tension was going to explode at a certain moment of critical period of history. And that's what happened at the height of perestroika. This is the first conflict, nationalistic conflict, emerging at a time when perestroika only inspired hope and optimism and so on. So we have a first war taking place at the last years of the Soviet Union until 1994. In this conflict, Armenian side won. It managed to control Karabakh, but also territories around Karabakh. And after the ceasefire of 94, we have 26 years of negotiations, where Armenia and Azerbaijan negotiated under the umbrella of OSCE, Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, where the formula was Armenia would return these Azeri territories that it occupied in the First War. In return, Azerbaijan will respect the will of Karabakh Armenians to self-determination. So these negotiations never reached a conclusion, and Azerbaijan was not interested, especially in the last 20 years, in diplomacy, because Azerbaijan had oil, Azerbaijan had gas, and thanks to these raw energy exports, it received huge billions. And it used this money, instead of developing Azerbaijan, instead of making Azerbaijan attractive and eventually saying to Armenians, maybe it's not that important that you are independent. And instead of seducing, instead of being a nice model, what Azerbaijan did was the hard way, was buying weapons, was threatening. So when you negotiate with your neighbor, and when your neighbor is at the same time threatening you, then you will not reach any agreement. And eventually Azerbaijan used the weapons it bought to launch wars.
Okay, så lige en kort recap af, hvor vi er. Konflikten går mere end 100 år tilbage i tiden, men altså i slut 80'erne, start 90'erne opløses Sovjetunionen og land fordeles. Aserbajdsjan og Armenien ryger i totterne på hinanden, og Nagorno-Karabakh-regionen bliver armensk i starten af 90'erne. Men så små 30 år senere, i ly af coronapandemien, går Aserbajdsjans diktator ind i Nagorno-Karabakh-regionen og starter det, man kalder 2020-krigen. Aserbajdsjan erobrer mere end 200 kvadratkilometer land mellem Nagorno-Karabakh-regionen og Armenien, og på den måde afskærer land imellem Nagorno-Karabakh-regionen og Armenien. Efter 2020-krigen starter fredsforhandlingerne, og Aserbajdsjan indgår et kompromis om at holde The Road of Life åben. Og det går nogenlunde ok i regionen, indtil en gruppe falske miljøaktivister blokerer hovedvejen og lukker The Road of Life og lukker Nagorno-Karabakh inde i 10 måneder. Den 19. september sidste år, altså i 2023, angriber og besætter aserbajdsjanske styrker Nagorno-Karabakh, og den 25. september, altså 6 dage senere, åbner Aserbajdsjan The Road of Life, så indbyggerne i Nagorno-Karabakh kan flygte til moderlandet Armenien.
Leading to more than 13,000 people fleeing west back into the country of Armenia. There is currently a ceasefire brokered by Russia, but only after an explosion at a gas station inside Nagorno-Karabakh, which injured at least 200 people.
The night, 24th September, last night, you talked about the gas station. Can you...
Yeah. You know, because of the blockade, there was no fuel at all in the country. So people had cars, but they couldn't move because they didn't have fuel. So, and then they were told that the petrol station in Stepanakert, fuel is being distributed to people that they could move with their families. And everybody went there. We don't know how it happened, but there was a huge explosion. And more than 200 people, mostly men, they died. And more than 200 people died during this one-day war in September 19, and more than 200 died during the explosion. Now imagine the situation of all these people. Families without their breadwinners, children without fathers. There was a family that both mother and father died because of the explosion. And 4 children stayed with their old grandma, which is around 90 years old. How they managed to reach Armenia, I cannot imagine. But they did. Their neighbors helped them, and they arrived to Armenia.
Den 25. september 2023 flygter mere end 100.000 armeniere ud af Nagorno-Karabakh. Biler, busser og skramlende lastbiler triller i lange køer langsomt op mod det uvejsomme bjergpas, over bjergpasset og ud af The Road of Life. Bag dem efterlader de deres familiegravsteder, deres hjem, deres kultur, børnenes legetøj, deres liv. 100.000 bliver fordrevet. En etnisk udrensning, der burde høre fortiden til. Det er som en direkte tv-transmission fra en civilisations undergang. Men ingen ser med. For det meste af Vesten har slået over på den kanal, der viser krigen i Ukraine. Og kun få uger senere eksploderer Mellemøsten, og så er der overhovedet ingen, der ender masseflugten i udkanten af Europa. Men selvom verden ikke ser på, så krydser de mange flygtninge grænsen ind til moderlandet Armenien, hvor nødhjælpsorganisationerne står klar til at hjælpe.
From the very first days of displacement, Caritas is with displaced people to help them, first of all with humanitarian aid, and then to help them with psychological, post-traumatic psychological support, because they are under permanent stress situation. After the first phase of the emergency of displacement, when we were providing only humanitarian and psychosocial support, the aim for us is to help them to integrate into the society. So for now, their main needs are sustainable housing and sustainable income sources. This is what we're trying to do for them.
Ja. Hvad kan jeg sige? Jeg tænker, den her historie aldrig helt slutter, hvilket jeg også startede med at postulere. Historien om Nagorno-Karabakh og Kaukasus-konflikten er helt sikkert ikke færdig fortalt. Men den her historie skal jo slutte et eller andet sted. Så hvorfor ikke slut med de mennesker, der kom i klemme og fik hjælp af Lucine og hendes kollegaer fra Caritas Armenien?
So one of my friends was in Goris on the second day of their arrival, and he took a lot of toys and candies with him because children needed not only food but also something that could give some happiness to them. And there were children sitting around the table, 2 brothers. One was around like 7 or 8 years old. The youngest was 3 or 4 years old. So he gave them some candies, toys. And the youngest said, "Oh, it's so nice, it's so beautiful, I'm so happy, the candies are very tasty, etc." Like, he was surprised, it was wonderful, especially for children who didn't have candies for 10 months. It didn't have chocolates for 10 months. They were very happy to get it. And then the eldest brother said, "Keep silence, don't speak loudly, because if others know that it is good here, they will attack us again." It's a sad story.
Ja, storebroren siger til lillebroren, "Ti stille, sig ikke højt, at chokoladen smager fantastisk." Så angriber de os bare igen, hvis de hører, at det er godt at være her. Tak fordi du lyttede med og lyttede efter. Og her er det sidste ord.
Azerbaijan last year used this fake environmental narrative to commit crime against humanity. And in this year, in November, Azerbaijan will be the host country of COP29. So COP being the yearly climate summit where diplomats from all over the world meet to negotiate what we can do to save our climate and our environment. So imagine a country which falsifies environmental issues to commit crimes, a country which cannot talk to its neighbor in a diplomatic way, hosting COP29. So this really reveals how sick our humanity and our political order, our international governance is today. And as I was saying, on the one hand, Karabakh can be a small story out there somewhere in the Caucasus that many Europeans have not heard and cannot place it on the map. But on the other hand, these issues come back home and touch the essence of our international political system. And in this way, if we look at it in this way, then we realize that what is happening out there touches our lives back here, back home.
Jeg har set verdensstyrte grus er tilbage med en ny episode om 14 dage. Jeg kan sige så meget, at vi skal til en by omkranset af 7 bjerge, et lille helle for folk på flugt. Glæd dig og brug tiden indtil da på at fortælle en ven om podcasten, så flere får ørerne op for nogle af de her vigtige historier. Jeg hedder Anders Guldberg, og podcasten her er lavet og udgivet af Caritas Danmark, støttet af Udenrigsministeriets Globuspulje. Mig selv og resten af holdet fra her har klippet og klistret lyden sammen, og Jakob Nu Sønderstrup har stået for original tema musik.